Can't see. Are we ready, John? I can't see myself.
Yep, you ready?
Okay, everyone. Well, welcome to both sides of the conversation. Welcome to our Sunday chat. We meet here in this virtual space every Sunday at 2 p.m. I am your guest co-host, Danielle Tompkins, and my co-founders of both sides of the conversation and my co-hosts for today are
John Henry, co-founder of Both Sides of the Conversation.
Great. And I'm going to just go ahead and kick it off with our community standards. So both sides of the conversation is providing a safe and honest space for open conversation. Please be respectful of that. Please be respectful of the panelists, hosts, and participants. Healthy debates and conversation are encouraged. Don't personalize anything with anyone. Name calling, bullying, shaming, or trolling will not be allowed here. Your perspective is yours. It's not a prescription. You don't have to agree, but please show respect. We are creating an open dialogue for healing and education. And as some of you guys know, it is March, it is Women's History Month, and we will be spotlighting wonderful Black women all this whole entire month. And I'd like to tell you about Miss Mary Ellen Pleasant. Miss Mary Ellen Pleasant was a Black American entrepreneur, financier, real estate magnate, and abolitionist. She worked on the Underground Railroad and helped bring it to California during the Gold Rush era. She was a lover, friend, and financial supporter of John Brown and well known in abolitionist circles. After the Civil War, she won several civil rights victories, one of which was cited and upheld in the 1980s and resulted in her being called the mother of human rights in California. She sued the bus company for not allowing her and Black women to board on, which she won that case. She is also the mother of civil rights west of the Mississippi. Historians estimate their combined fortune totaled more than $30 million, a sum that would equivalent to roughly around $864 million today, based on inflation. As well as a wealthy African American woman in the 1800s, Mary Ellen Pleasant didn't exactly flaunt her wealth, but she didn't hide it either. That is Miss Mary Ellen Pleasant, and she is from here in the Bay Area, and that's our Woman Spotlight of the Week. Back to you, John.
Thank you very much. What a phenomenal woman. Also, every live I've been telling you guys, it is also Social Worker Month. So just want to say shout out to all the social workers out there that's impacting our community, doing phenomenal things. With that being said, also I want to send a condolence and prayer out to my buddy Ron Parker, who passed away, and to his family, to the Parker family. We love you. We support you. We there. I mean, I know this time is very hard, but that's what this conversation is about. He passed away from having high blood pressure, and this is one of the big issues, having a heart attack, having these big issues with our health in our community. So with that being said, it's great to just kind of talk about today's conversation. We have the legacy keepers coming back from the Black Panther Party to come talk about this health, give us some of the solutions and things from our last previous conversation. I think that is phenomenal. So we will be getting started here shortly. Just also wanted to shout out the San Francisco Black BSU yesterday. What a phenomenal presentation that those young people put together. Erica Morris leading the task over there, getting things done. Way to go for board president Shamon Walton showing up, different individuals in the community being there to support our young people. That's what this is all about, making sure that we get our young people involved and help them steer the way so that we can make change here, not only in the Bay Area, but throughout this country. We know all change starts with our young people. We got to get behind them and we have to support them. It's also been a violent, tragic weekend in the Bay Area. A lot of violence happening this weekend. We just got to continue to do better, work hard as a community. And again, the resources are rolling out from different city and state uh, funding. And hopefully we can go ahead and curb some of this violence with the resources that's coming to the community. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and bring up our guest today and let them open up and introduce themselves. I know a couple more is coming in, but I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to a CBO and Dr. Satoro. Hello, you guys.
All right, all right.
Hello.
How's everybody doing?
All right.
Good, good, good.
Great. Go ahead, CBO.
Okay. So, all power to the people. So act like you know, man. It's the platform. It's the 10-point program. Freedom, employment, robbery, housing, education, healthcare, police brutality. Plus, we want to end all wars of aggression. We want a fair trial by jury of peers. We want land, bread, housing, clothing, education, justice, and peace. And people's control of technology. Greetings. My name is Ezekiel Holiday. I'm a revolutionary hip hop artist and a community activist. I'm here today to present part two to the Blue Ribbon for Healthcare Initiative. Last month, what you just heard was a 10-point platform from the Black Panther Party. We're here today to talk about point number 6, which says we want free healthcare for all poor and oppressed people. Last month, we did part 1 and we asked the 2 fundamental questions. What are the healthcare concerns that exist in the poor communities and how can we solve them? Research has shown that people in poor communities have less access to quality healthcare, and there's a link between poverty and poor healthcare and low income status. All of that's associated with a variety of healthcare concerns like high blood pressure, infant mortality, short life expectancy, cancer, dangerous work environments, bad air quality, a lack of access to clean drinking water, poor mental health, food deserts, and all sorts of issues that disproportionately affect poor communities. So we're here today to present part number 2, solutions to those 2 fundamental questions. We have our guest speakers, Black Panther Party alumni members, Dr. Satu Ned, Professor Steve McCutcheons, the Honorable Sister Kathy Campbell. Um, our presentation is going to go as follows. We're going to open it up with Dr. Satu Ned. He's going to talk about 7 healthcare points of attention in the communities. Then we're going to bring up Kathy, and she's going to talk about nutrition. Then we're going to end it off with Professor Professor Steve McCutcheons, and he's going to talk about mental health. So remember, healthcare is a right and not a privilege. And with that, we're gonna open it up, and I'm gonna bring up Dr. Stu Ned. So all parts of the people.
All right. Thank you so much, CBO, for that introduction. And first of all, I want to give thanks for this forum, John and Danielle and the rest of the staff. It's such an important forum and the wonderful things of informing our community. This concept will grow, and we hope to be a part of it as time goes along. So I want to let everybody be clear that my doctorate is in the field of education. So that one thing that we really truly believe in is, first of all, giving the knowledge of what confronts us, and then taking a look at some of the things that we can do ourselves for solutions to these issues. The first part, of course, is knowing what affects us and knowing what we should truly take a look at as Black people that affects men, women, children, both boys and girls, and our families in general. So, my presentation today, the information that I will be sharing with you, is based upon real statistics that really aren't brought down to what we call ground level. The concept that we want to develop is one where we're able to not only take this to the community and organizations, but this should be something implemented in the schools. The health aspect of teaching our children about health is 3 times more in affluent white communities. They learn about health issues, their body as far as diseases, germs, all these kind of things, and most important of all, what affects them as people. This is something that has been lacking. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about the title, which I entitled this medical genocide against Black people. And why did Dr. Satru Ned entitle this particular part of the presentation that? Simply because the statistics, in fact, point to either you have been negligent in looking at the healthcare that affects our community with no real studies, or you have neglected us on purpose. So that decision will be left up to those of you today who have joined us, for you to make that decision. And this is just the beginning of going in depth. We want to be able to develop this so that we can take it to every aspect of our community. We're not depending upon those in positions, because just like before, we know nothing is not going to happen unless we enact it ourselves. Just like a breakfast program, they weren't feeding, we did. And as John mentioned earlier, as he opened up the program, it starts with our youth. It starts with the youth and the family. So let's get going here. Medical genocide against Black people. The Institute of Medical, or the Institute of Medicine, has revealed troubling findings. Racial and ethnic minority citizens, especially Black Americans, are more likely than white patients to receive substandard medical care, leading to poor health outcomes. And let's take a look and talk about this aspect. Now, this comes from a reputable source. And the problem always is, here's the facts and findings, but nothing is ever done to change those conditions that will make it equitable and the kind of health care that Black people need. So it really starts with ability. A solution would be that the knowledge of these things should be given to our people in the beginning. For instance, if I'm in the schools, this should be taught to our children the truth. It's just like point number 4 on the 10-point platform and program. We want an education that teaches the true nature of this deck American society in reference to our children. But it also lets our families know if, in fact, there are things that affect us. And so what I'm going to go into next section is actually 8 things that affect us. And most of us have known family members, individuals, acquaintances, or we hear through the grapevine, friends of friends who have succumbed to one of these, what we call medical conditions. And usually it happens when it's too late or stage 4. And let's look into those issues as we go along in each point. Let's first of all talk about diabetes, which is 60% more common in Blacks than in whites. Black people are up to 2.5 times more likely to suffer a limb amputation. Many of us have heard stories, Uncle George, Mr. John, Mrs. Jones got their leg amputated, or the hand or their foot. And why is this so common? If it's something that continuously is done, why is there not research in terms of what affects us? And I'm going to mention this concept, why isn't there research? Because it has not been done. So therefore, we're following the same medical genocide practice when you know that there is answers if you do research. If you can come up with a vaccine that's still untested within a year, you can definitely come up with methods that would be alternatives to what is happening. And we understand a lot of it is the living style, the diet, the stress, and the hereditary aspects involved. So this is something that we ask ourselves, and how can it be to allow 5 times as much where our limbs are amputated, where we lose part of our body because of medical negligence? So this is a question, and a solution concept would be based upon getting people to understand this, and most important of all, getting some of our medical professionals in the Black community behind that whole process, a health forum. And we'll continuously mentioning that as we go along, where we have Black professional doctors and nurses coming together and saying, as Fannie Lou Hamer said, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. We're going to make amends to where we're able to inform not only our young people in the schools, and it should be a mandate about our health, but also for them to understand what to watch out for and what to be understanding when their mother or their father or their uncle or aunt has diabetes, and how also it could affect their health as time goes along. Asthma. Black people are 3 times more likely to die of asthma than whites. And let's look at it. And the next few things that I talk about are going to be all related. Let's take a look at the concept of asthma. Many of us have it, and some of us don't find out later on during allergy season that we have it. But typically, if we look at the conditions of where Black communities have been placed, and you look at the fact of older buildings still have asbestos in it, you look at the fact that there are still lead paint, which of course, if our children eat it, automatically destroys their ability to learn, which was pointed out in Flint and Washington, D.C., Detroit, lead in the water. Right there at McClymonds High School in West Oakland, lead in the water for 20 years, recently found out in the last year and a half to 2. So these concepts of, are they done on purpose, or is it negligence, or I just don't know. So if we really take a look at these things and we know that they're there, then we have to come to conclusions that make a lot of sense and begin to wonder and ask our own questions and come up with our own solutions based upon, first of all, first step, informing ourselves what the problems are. Sarcoidosis. Sarcoidosis is a disease involving abnormal collections of inflammatory cells that form lumps known as granulomas. The disease, listen to this, is 16 times more common among Black women than among white women. The disease was a disease that killed former NFL star Reggie White at age 43. Now, listen to this. They claim that originally it was a rare disease, but all of a sudden it now affects Black women. And it's a fine line between that and asthma. Sometimes Black women is being diagnosed as asthma, but it's not that. It becomes what we talked about here, sarcoidosis, an actual a lung problem that has not been diagnosed. So now you're telling us it was rare, but all of a sudden it affects 16 times more people, in particular Black women. The cough. They're going to the doctor and telling it's asthma because there has not been research done. And one of the solutions on that is for us to be aware, and when we go, to make sure that that is on our list. This is actually the third one: diabetes. I want to know about asthma. I want to know about this sarcoidosis, which affects mostly Black women. And this was something new. After researching this, I had never known this, and I don't think a whole lot of other people knew this fact also. So the purpose or the misdiagnosis, which one is it? Is it purposefully done, or is it a misdiagnosis out of ignorance? That you don't know that this is happening and you never diagnosed anyone until there was a crusade led by several women who became ambassadors, Black women who became ambassadors concerning this disease, just like another known disease of sickle cell anemia, which I'll talk about very shortly here. So the preventative aspect is number one, knowing what this is and making sure that the medical professionals, whoever your doctors are, this part of this whole list is something that your healthcare practitioner should have. And when they ask you that silly question, what are you here for? What can I do for you? Well, this is what you should be doing, and this is what I need to know. So let's go on to the next one, of course, lung cancer. Despite lower tobacco exposure, Black men are 50 times more likely than white men to get lung cancer. But also, this is part of the educational process with our young people, and that again starts in the school. And listen, right now, we should be starting when they're in elementary because that's where they're starting to vape and smoke and do everything else at 11 and 10, 9, 10, 11, and 12 years old. And there has been a systemic campaign in our community to capture young people. And of course, they found out that they pushed the menthol cigarettes, menthol products in our community. Years ago, when I was young, I remember Cools and Salem's. I don't know the stuff they have now, but there were always guys just menthol. Menthol, when you inhale it, it opens up your lungs in a craving to where it goes deeply into your lungs where you crave more of the menthol, which carries the nicotine, which becomes addictive and you are hooked. And this is a campaign that has been done on purpose. And in California, I think it's off the hook. 1 in every 12 Black men now are exposed to that, and they're really targeting our youth. So what we saw before, the lowering of that, is now on the uptick in terms of capturing young Black men and women in that by using the menthol cigarettes. But also we can talk about, again, the environment. Let's talk about the social economic aspects of where we live and where Black people live, the quality of the air. We could talk about West Oakland. You can talk about Hunters Point. You could talk about in the shipyards where they wanted to build all that home housing over there, and they found it was riddled with cancer, chemicals that cause breathing problems. So the social economical aspect has an unbelievable effect on the health crisis and the health medical genocide that is being conducted against Black people because we don't know in general what affects us to stop that process. Strokes. Strokes kill 4 times more than white Americans. 35 to 54-year-old Black Americans. Let me put it that way. But that does not exclude younger Black Americans who may have issues with obesity or bad diets or exposed to a lot of pressure in their environment, the pressure that puts great stress and anxiety, which drives up your blood pressure and other things. So why is this happening in our community? What are some of the conditions that we're confronted with? One of the concepts that I like to talk about is not post-traumatic stress disorder, but for our people in our community and all of us, it's what we call ongoing stress disorder. It never stops. So all these concepts leading into the high blood pressure, the ability to not have fresh, clean air, live in an environment that has old chemicals that have never been cleared out, and they purposely will build and place people in those areas. Even when they were building what we call affordable housing, which is a term no longer exists, they were placed in areas where the ground was not too good and where there were chemicals present. And then the building materials they used also led to that. And they knew that these things were happening at that point in time. High blood pressure. Black people develop high blood pressure earlier in life. Why is that? I wonder. And with much higher blood pressure levels than whites. Much higher. Didn't say a little bit. Much higher. Nearly 42% of Black men and more than 45% of Black women aged 20 I'm going to read that part again. Nearly 42% of Black men and more than 45% of Black women aged 20 and older have high blood pressure. I'm pretty sure many of us have known people who the blood pressure actually was to the point where it really got out of hand and it took their lives. Relatives, friends, acquaintances. We hear those stories throughout our community. And I don't think there's no Black family that has not been touched by that, or even within your own family or your own personal being having to deal with high blood pressure, which leads to everything else, the stroke concept, and also leads to the heart attacks. Why is that? Why hasn't there been research enough done with us to identify preventative concepts? We understand a lot of it has to do with where we live. We understand that a lot of it has to do with the diet, but we also understand that a lot of it has to do with the pressure of not having, with the inability to thrive because there are things put in front of you to stop you from being able to move forward. So all of these things lead to that physical demise. So if we're looking at the facts of the matter, then we have to really begin to ask ourselves that question. Is it again neglect, or is it part of genocide? Cancer. And many of us have had, before I read this, have had experience. I've had personal experience, in family concerning. I lost 2 children to cancer, one to breast cancer and one of my sons to a tumor. They claimed it was rare again. Cancer treatment is equally successful for all races, so they claim. Yet, Black men have a 40% higher cancer death rate than white men. African American women have a 20% higher cancer death rate than women. And wonder why is that also? Does that again point to the socioeconomic conditions and some of the environment that we live in, and also to the food that is available to us in those areas? And most important of all, how come there isn't a preventative measure besides educating women and men concerning this fact, but taking a look at it, how they can create preventative measures, and most important of all, why it's important to track this and be tested earlier for all the various forms of cancer that affect Black men and Black women. Now, you would think that a medical professional would do that, but let's go back to the beginning of what I said, that the system, medical practice, is not set up for the benefit of Black people. So even though these facts are known, they are not sharing this knowledge and information unless they are forced to, unless they are embarrassed to the point where it is shown. And we, because of this COVID thing, and that's a whole nother discussion, there's so much confusion. And all of a sudden, it's like you're being in a water line for that, and you're pushed to the back of the line. No one knows what's happening. No one knows what's going on with our community. No one knows how many people have had the shots. Nobody knows anything. It's like, again, the total neglect, which is common in the health industry. Why are these disparities? Well, they say genes play a role, but also they finally come to the conclusion, which we already know because we live it. So does the environment in which people live, socioeconomic status, and yes, racism. Now, these statistics. I love it when you do these type of studies, my brothers and sisters and everybody listening. You're using the information and facts that you check and double check and triple check and use it on your own personal experience and family experience and friends experience. But it's great because then it's like, why hasn't anything been done? But again, this is the beginning knowledge that we created and will continue to refine, that can go out to every quarter of our community. The first of all is being knowledgeable of what it is and what affects us And then we can begin to think about really changing the dynamics of the healthcare for ourselves, our children, and our community. Statistics. This is number 8 on sickle cell in America. Now, before I talk about sickle cell, I want to talk about the fact that sickle cell anemia was our pandemic. And basically, it still is. We, of course, if you don't know the story, that was one of the concepts when we talked about preventative health care. That was really an epidemic in our community, and there was very little knowledge. So the first concept, as we're doing now, was we began to inform people about what sickle cell anemia was. That it was something, a mutated cell basically becomes sickle cell, and you can imagine what it does trying to go through a blood vessel. I'll leave that simple explanation at that. And also the effect that it has on our community. So we embarked upon creating with Dr. Bert Small, who is still living today, helped create the George Jackson Free Medical Health Clinic, one of close to 17 health clinics that we had all across the nation. And it was right here in Berkeley, California. And one of the concepts was we developed the Sickle Cell Anemia Foundation under his direction, the Black Panther Party and Dr. Bert Small, but it became a national issue. So we began testing our community for sickle cell anemia. The first case documented in Oakland, California in 1971. And what we did, we went door to door from community to community. And at many times we had doctors and nurses and psychologists and everybody you can imagine medical field going out in the community also. Actually, many of those doctors and nurses that first started with us ended up becoming part of Doctors Without Borders, who lend their compassion and love to people around the world whenever there was a need. So sickle cell anemia, we were testing. I think we tested overall close to 500,000 people nationwide. There was no research being done. We would have survival conferences here in Oakland, California, where we would register thousands and test maybe 10 or 15,000 people at one time for sickle cell anemia. So one of the more important things before I go about and read a little bit more about this, the foundation, because we embarrassed the U.S. government, Richard Nixon poured tens of millions of dollars into the research. Before we initiated it, there was only $100,000 a year for sickle cell anemia research. Like, we don't care. We really don't care. And even today, our young people, because it is a young person's disease, imagine you having children and your child, as a young child, 1, 2, 3 years old, in and out of the hospital for the rest of their life. The average age is anywhere from 42 to 47. We have a young lady in our network who works diligently with us in Southern California who suffers directly from the full-blown sickle cell anemia. And most important of all, for us, this is something that was our pandemic and still is. There are 1 in 12 Black people, 1 in 12 who have the sickle cell trait. Why is that important? Because if 2 people come together with the trait, then what will happen is they have an opportunity. Well, actually, I won't call it an opportunity. If they decide to have a family, anybody who wants to have a family is a beautiful opportunity. But their child may come out full-blown sickle cell. There have been families, 2 people who knew it and found out about it, decided not to have children. How painful, because they didn't want to see their child go through that excruciating in and out of the hospital all the time for the rest of their life. So one of the solutions for this, of course, is mass testing. So we're not going to get caught up in getting shrouded and our health issues be pushed aside with what they talk about is happening with COVID. Our whole concept essentially is to be able to test everyone is one of the solutions. But here's the other stickler about this. Our population has changed. You have Indians, you have Africans, Americans who have 35 to 40% of the children born with sickle cell or the trait. And so now here we have people mixing together from all groups and all races. So the actual ratio now is higher from those groups of people that are living here and Black people in America. So this is something that needs to be addressed through the knowledge, information, and testing. Well, let me go ahead and an inherited blood disorder where blood cells become sickle crescent shaped like a moon. Most Black people are unaware of the existence of sickle cell disease, and that is true. People have heard about it, and since that era, after the 80s, they cut all the funds again. We don't care. We hope you just, and they misdiagnosis. And then when people go, because the pain is so excruciating, it's like, I want number 10 or whatever you got. And it's really warranted because of the pain. Did you know the medical fact is that you cannot get addicted to any drugs if it's really addressing real pain? I'm not talking about the pain of life, the real pain. So they are labeling Black people with sickle cell as drug addicts. There are only two places in the nation, here in Oakland, California, because of our relationship with Children's Hospital, which has an excellent program for youth, and they actually, after you're 18, still will treat those child patients, and they just opened up one in Southern California in the Watts area. Those are the only two areas in the nation which really have real full-blown knowledge and care for Black people, sickle cell anemia patients. I'm talking about the rest of the country. You can look it up yourself. If it happened, then it happened yesterday, but of course it didn't. So this is what we call our pandemic. This is another crisis. So again, is it genocide? So sickle cell anemia is an autoimmune disease which is inherited through the gene power or cell brain of every living cell. These cell brains directly affect and determine physical characteristics and other traits in a person's body. Since the disease is inherited at birth, its agonizing symptoms and pain begin early in childhood. And again, but most Black people aren't aware of it. Why? Because there isn't information out there. Why? Is it because out of negligence or not knowing? We have to look at the fact if you know and you've known over this period of time, then it's out of negligence and you don't care. And one of the solutions to that is bringing that back to the forefront, not depending upon them, but we have to do it ourselves. We're talking about in our communities, and there are groups of doctors, Black doctors and nurses. You're taking, instead of just testing for blood pressure, you're testing for sickle cell anemia with the mobile vans and all throughout our communities, not only here in the Bay Area, but throughout California, throughout the nation. This is why this is part of the solution of taking the concept in our own hands. Also informing families when they go into counseling, they want to have children. That should be a main thing. If you're African American, you're from the India, you're from Turkey, you're from even the Dominica. There's many populations now that are involved. So of course, from the Africa, then you should be tested for the trait to make sure that you understand what you're faced with, since there is no cure at this point in time. The only cure is a bone marrow transplant, which cannot necessarily match. There was a doctor who was on 60 Minutes about a year ago, been researching for 20, 30 years. He thought he had found an answer to some form of transfusion, but he said he didn't have enough money and that the National Health Agency refused to give him more money for research. This was featured on 60 Minutes, but like, what has happened since then? Nothing. Why? Because unless we take the issue at heart and begin to make it happen in our communities, then nothing is going to take place. Sickle cell anemia occurs among about 1 out of every 500 Black or African American births. That's a high rate. If sickle cell traits are included in the statistics, then 1 in 12 Blacks and African Americans are born with the disease. It's a much higher rate than COVID and a lot of other things. 1 in 12. The disease occurs about 1 out of every 36,000 in Hispanic births, but actually that rate seems to be rising because of the fact of populations of people of color coming together and actually starting families together. Thanks to people now testing DNA with DNA, was that Ancestry and 23andMe are finding out that there are parts of various sub-Saharan populations, and they came from areas where sickle cell is prevalent. So it affects a larger population, but it's overwhelming for African Americans. Before 1987, when they started pouring money after that period of time, we brought it to the point. The mortality rate of our children with sickle cell anemia was 68%. So if your child was suffering from sickle cell anemia, imagine the pain of the doctor telling you, because of no research, no real effort to come up with a hereditary or cure or alleviation to where their life would be, create a longer life for them. 68%. And I don't think really, I don't know, I was looking for the statistics now because there isn't much study, but I can tell you it's not that much better at this point in time unless you are at Children's Hospital in Oakland or the facility I believe that they have in Southern California. Across the rest of the nation, it could be very iffy and misdiagnosed. About 1,000 children in the United States are born with this disease every year, while millions of people are believed to have the sickle cell trait. The number of hospitalizations that occur in the United States because of sickle cell anemia every year, 15 to 25,000. The main cause of the ER visit, we're talking about emergency room. We're not talking about I don't feel good, let me go to the doctor, call my doctor, make an appointment. We're talking about like a full-blown emergency. The main cause of emergency room visits and hospital admission are vascular occlusive crisis, a VOC. And what that means is that you're at a crisis where your blood vessels are blocked by the sickle-shaped cells to the point that you could teeter and go either way. That's what they call a VOC crisis. At that point in time, you're hospitalized, you can go north or you can end up going south. Let's say 50-50 every time you go. Now, let's look at the emotional, not only in the person who's suffering the pain, but the emotional effect that it has on your family. And you're in an area or a hospital where they act like they don't know what's happening. And this has happened. We've heard so many testimonies about people in various rooms or hospitals who have no clue about what is going on. The parent or the person who took them to the hospital had to inform these medical personnel about what is going on. 197,000 emergency room visits per year. That's 2 visits per patient on an average. And then the time that you stay can be anywhere from, a week or two to maybe a month or two. It depends upon how you fare. And it is a back and forth issue. It's like a revolving door. So in other illnesses, and make a comparison, how many more times does a person go there to the hospital for sickle cell anemia? Let's take a look at this. 4 times higher than people who have congestive heart disease. 13 times higher than those with HIV. The VOCs are the reason for 70% of visits for adults with sickle cell disease, despite the majority being managed at home. So 95% of the hospitalizations are due to that vascular crisis. 50%, listen to this is medical ineptness. 50% of patients discharge prematurely while still experience great pain. That's where it comes in. And they actually put on Black people's medical records that this person is just a junkie. People have reported their medical records showing that they're junkie. They come there for prescription pain, which is not true. So is this again out of ignorance and neglect? Or is this out of something you're doing on purpose because you really don't care. Like I said, the only treatment is a risky bone marrow treatment for sickle cell anemia. So why are there not enough studies done in every area? If you go and talk to any medical professional in terms of what affects us as a people, there have not been many studies done. So one solution for me, looking at these kinds of things, is that there are many forums in our community we used to use to get people to talk about these issues. We mentioned the schools. We mentioned, I remember gathering places, but believe it or not, we've given actually community forums and events in barbershops. A barbershop, and here's some, they're wonderful places when we were able to do that. But even now, having these type of conversations online, having them with community groups and people in our community, the first step is giving them the knowledge that this exists. The second step is taking that information. What can we do now? Number one, like the sickle cell anemia testing, a solution, and informing all our families and people if they're, and also counseling people who are thinking about starting a family. It should be routine. It should be something because of the outrageous statistics. It should be routine, and then we should be able to force the fact that we want more research, and that should be what we call collaboration with Black and minority, but in particular, Black medical professionals to come together as a real task force. And along with community people, brothers and sisters, concerned citizens, allies, and people who want to see a change, we should be allowed to work together and do these kind of things as one. So I'm going to end here. I mean, we could talk about this in terms of what to do, but I hope I've outlined some of the things. Again, the first step is education. And this is part of the education of knowing what we're faced with. And then we talk about diving into it more. But hopefully I outlined some aspects of what we can do. I'm going to yield. I thank you so much for this time because we can go on. Again, we'll be doing more of this. So I want to pass this on to the next person. Thank you so much for having me, allowing me, John and Daniel, to give this part of the presentation.
Thank you. And I'm sure we're going to have a bunch of questions because I have a couple questions at the end, but we'll get through this and then we'll get the questions. People watching us live on our YouTube, if you would like to ask questions or you want to talk to any of the panelists, please use the YouTube live chat. And then we'll get your questions up here on the screen so that they can answer any questions for you. If you're watching live of our Facebook page and you have comments, please leave comments in the comments and we'll pull them up here as we come closer to the end of the presentation. We'll start having some dialogue at the end. So with that being said, as CBO, Steve's trying to reach out. If Dr. Saturo or one of you can resend the link to Steve, he's having some trouble trying to get in. So if you guys could try to send it to him, I just put it in the chat. With that being said, CBO, you want to go ahead and introduce Catherine or your next guest, or what do you want to do here?
Yeah. Okay. Next up, we're going to bring up the Honorable Kathy Campbell. She's going to speak about nutrition. Kathy, are you ready?
Yes.
Okay.
Can everyone hear me? Can you all hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. Yep, we can hear you.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm just going to give you just a little insight on how we dealt with nutrition when you school, but dealt with nutrition with our child development center in 1969, because that was the era and time that we really pushed for the breakfast program, the free breakfast program, to be in all the public schools. And let me see if I can get there.
You kind of freezing up a little bit. You kind of freezing up a little bit, Kath.
Uh,
You freeze.
okay. Nutrition is very, very important. And I want to read something here. And I'm not sure if my face will disappear, but I'm going to read. Okay. Hello?
Yeah, you was freezing up a little bit. I don't know if you want to check your Wi-Fi connection. You was kind of freezing up.
You're muted, and unmute yourself, Catherine.
I unmuted.
There you go. We can hear you now. You kind of, there you go.
Better.
We can hear you now. You froze up.
Okay.
Yeah, you freezing up.
All right. So now
you might want to log out and come back
I
in.
froze up again.
Try to log out and come back in Chrome. Try to come in Chrome. Maybe we could get Steve up here until you get figured out. Try to log out and come back in.
Okay. All right. All right.
CDO,
All right. Sorry for the technical difficulty.
Yep, sorry for the technical difficulty. It happens. Let's see if we could get Steve. Maybe we could get started with Steve here until she figure it out. Unmute yourself,
In the meantime,
Steve.
we're going to
Unmute yourself, Steve. Oh.
All right, I'm 5x5.
Professor
Everybody good to go? Everybody good to go? I'm 5x5 now. Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. And while Catherine is readjusting, I'll just make a brief introduction. And then when she's ready, then I'll turn the floor back over to her. Is that okay? Okay, but my aspect of this conversation here, I'm addressing the concerns and the crises in terms of mental health in the African American community. And we're looking at the understanding and solutions in that area as it affects Black people here in this society. Now, during the period of recorded history, of what was and is presented and perceived and identified as problems in the head and subsequent actions that are attributed to what is presently recognized as mental health problems are too often seen as aberrations, anomalies, and some difference in people, in persons, that family, outside observers, and the larger social environment of people seldom understand and lack the ability and the interest to investigate, let alone attempt to examine those areas and arrive at treatments, humane treatments and solutions. Now, here today in 2021, technological advancement still outpasses outpaces the social conditions and the effects on the mental well-being and conditions of those who have been unable or unwilling to act to secure their individual well-being and to productively engage in lifestyles that are rewarding and satisfying, and also to fit within that prescription model of this society. Now, generationally, the mention of our family and kin having some type of mental issues being alluded to as a head case, being possessed out of their minds, and other descriptors basically have been due to ignorance and lack of ability to further see the conditions that have brought on the causes that affect Black men, women, and children in this society. And I emphasize both not only the black intergenerational aspect, but also the societal aspect. Now, these conditions that have been diagnosed or have been recognized academically, scholarly, and medically as mental health problems, mental health issues. These are the doorways to stereotypes that have long plagued the Black community. And is another question, is another problem in terms of why in the Black community we have not sought to actively seek treatment and solutions for those of us in our family or within our environments that may suffer from some of the conditions that the larger society and in the medical areas have identified as mental health problems. Um, Today, we just want to revisit some of those conditions and view the methods of treatment and or possible outcomes that are realistic and attainable in terms of the Black communities. What is significant here is that this presentation and the discussion, it moves from the family, the individual to society, and the impact, and then back to the individual again. There will be areas of disagreement, lack of understanding, and misunderstanding. But we will bring as much clarity as we can in the effort to better understand the situation and the effects on Blacks in particular, and maybe generate that narrative that others who investigate and treat these conditions on a professional level or in a community-based environment can become further enlightened and willing to raise their voices and bring their skills to the table. And before I even go into some of this presentation, I have a general disagreement in terms of the vocabulary around mental health disorder, mental health disease. From my perspective, um, because when I view the body of knowledge that it goes to the treatment of those ailments listed as disease and the disorders in the total package, all of these are no more than imbalances that create mental conditions which differ, which are altered in respect to the larger social society and its interpretation and its processing of how those who had those conditions are perceived and how they are subsequently treated or ignored. So, as much as I can and as much as I will, I'll refer to the mental health condition and crisis as an imbalance and not as a disease or disorder. And for the purpose of this presentation, that again is my prerogative. So, when we address the mental health crisis in the Black community, and we go back to the question of the stigma in terms of how we as Black people approach our own family, our own kin, and how we view those who appear or actually have exhibited signs that show that there's something of an anomaly in terms of their behavior, either how they express themselves or how they behave individually and in concert with others. And from the medical point of view, basically, from the point of view of psychology and from the point of view of psychiatry, and I'm going to dismiss psychiatry and psychiatric um, treatments altogether for this discussion here. And I just want to focus on the whole mind and in conversation with the physical and mental well-being of us as individuals. But that stigma that's attached to mental conditions in the African community, it has had harmful effects. Before we can get into a treatment, we're trying to look at some of the core things that have happened, which have provided this negative image to those that we see who are having mental issues, who have that break from the rest of us who appear to be normal or perceived as normal and accepted as normal within the total social population, or in specific within our own community, within our own family. Now, some of the harmful effects of that stigma, they include the reluctance to seek help or treatment. This has been generational, when members of our families have found that someone, either in their family, in their nuclear family, or their extended family, may exhibit signs and actions of behavior that do not conform to either the family idea, let alone the larger social idea, then we tend to shun them. We have been shunning our own people, our own members of the family. We pushed them to the curb, kept them hid in the closet, kept them out of sight from others who come into our presence. We've done this generationally because we do not want to accept the fact that there are those who among us who have experienced situations over the years that have not been treated, either because they failed to seek attention, the family, the family around them, and the network around them has failed to address them and to investigate those issues, those conditions there, to see what are the causes that lead to the conditions, and if they are not pathological or physiological, what can be done. If there's nothing organically involved, then there must be another answer. There must be another road in order to look at those individuals and find out what is causing the problem. What is the problem? Now, the lack of understanding by family, friends, co-workers, or others, these are part of the stigma. Why those of us who are perceived, those who may be perceived as with some type of or some level of mental disorder, have been overlooked, ignored, shunned, and failed to seek treatment. With that stigma, there's also the fewer opportunities for work, school, or social activities, or trouble finding housing. This goes to part of the question that if the individual is having issues that are not medically related, there is something external, there is something outside, either from the people around them, the environments around them, that they act on, fail to act on, or act on them. This brings into focus what is their relationship to society? Are they having family crisis at home or with their nuclear and extended family? This could be part of the question that directly affects that individual. Could there be school issues? Could there be employment issues? Could there be medical issues that have resulted due to some of those conditions that have accumulated over a period of time? Those chronic conditions. Now, bullying, physical violence, or harassment, these are all contributing factors that, when internalized, have created mental health imbalances. The inability of many Black people to have affordable insurance or insurance that will look into the nature of the mental health issue and to accurately recognize the conditions and how it affects their behavior, how it affects their behavior. Many Black people do not have that ability to go into those environments that will provide for those treatments and investigations. And also with the stigma attached in terms of the inability of Black people to look for solutions, either in terms of questions about themselves or questions that others have about that individual, is that the belief that they'll never succeed at certain challenges or that they can't improve their situation. These are situations effective that are society related, society directed. These happen to do with many of the things that stem from childhood and are continued over into adulthood and late adulthood. When many of us were born, we were told we had certain mantras that the family and others passed through to us, either in school or somewhere in the extended range of our family. Um, we were told to obey and respect family, do well at school so that you could make a living, get a job, be successful, respect God and country. Those mantras have been internalized generationally among Black people. But in many families where there are individuals who exhibit some of these behaviors that are labeled as mentally unstable, mentally imbalanced. These things have been internalized, and because of a failure and in excess to the health care, they have not been addressed. And mainstream society continues to treat those with some type of separation, mental separation, and a physical and a behavior different deviance. They are treated differently. They are treated differently because of the perception of mainstream society in terms of identifying what has been a condition that is not individual, but is society generated. Now, when we go to treatment in terms of the mental health conditions, when those clients eventually do seek out treatment, either at the non-professional level from family or when they do seek that treatment from those engaged in the mental health treatment fields, oftentimes those who engage those clients, they only look at that one individual and in the isolated set of circumstances. Mental health imbalances do not exist in a vacuum. That is the fact that is too often overlooked during the treatment phase with mental health individuals. In a vacuum, I'm alluding to the point that all the treatment provider is interested in is what is your problem? What is causing your problem? And the individual may say, I'm frustrated. I'm anxious all the time. I'm angry all the time. Why? The treatment caregiver has to also examine that it may be to a lack of education based on the relation that they have with their peers. It may be due to the lack of employment, meaningful and gainful unemployment. It may have to do with housing conditions. It may have to do with other medical and healthcare related conditions that the mental health provider is not tuned into. Many of the mental health conditions that are prevalent today, we have addressed not particularly, but through the condition itself in our 10-point program and platform. When we speak in terms of decent education, when we speak in terms of decent housing, when we speak in terms of full employment, when we speak in terms of police brutality, when we speak in terms of legal justice, when we speak to those conditions, many of which affect the masses of Black people, these are many of the causes of mental health conditions that affect Black and poor people in particular, going to causes outside of a particular focus on one individual, but looking at the large general social impact on those individuals. And this is what the treatment of mental health disorders has overlooked, ignored, or swept out of public view in terms of attention and where areas of focus need to be concentrated. Now, saying that is that we look at, in terms of treatment, we look at the individual from the microcosm up through the macrocosm, and from the family beginnings intergenerationally, how they are able to participate in the social dynamics of this time here, and how the large society perceives any of those who exhibit signs of a difference that is not approved of by many others in the in the social system that who accept what to them is normal, but anyone else's deviance from their perceptions of normal is a mental health disorder. So when we consider that, some of the other treatments that we have come across have had to do with those that have been prescribed from the psychological perspective. And from the psychological perspective, in terms of things that are prescribed by the American Medical Association through the collection of psychological associations, they find that traumas have much to do with the causes during the lifetime of individuals, whether they're acute traumas due to incidents of, especially for Black men, including parental dysfunctions at home, traumas that are ongoing, that are passed on not only from the child, but out from the child out into those that they encounter once they leave home, which carries into the school, their behaviors in school, which in turn carries over into their later interactions, social interactions outside of school, and maybe into the employment realm. So those negative behaviors, those traumas that they may have encountered during earlier periods that was sudden then may become chronic. They are long lasting, and those long lasting traumas that have happened, however narrow or insignificant they mean to a given individual, they may carry long lasting effects in terms of how the individual behaves and is able to communicate down the road through the course of their lives. We have found that those who have experienced types of trauma during their lives, either in the house, in the environments, in their neighborhoods, in school, and through employment, they have experienced fear for their own lives, especially in terms of family trauma at home, disputes between mother and father, disputes between us siblings that have become traumatic. Those may carry a lingering effect in terms of the mental well-being of an individual. This can lead to avoidance and dissociation from others, either on a friendship basis or at the personal level. It may lead an individual to become hypervigilant in terms of looking over their shoulders, always being weary of others that they come into contact with. Those conditions may be perceived, they may be incorrect, ill-conceived perceptions, but these are based on prior experiences. And when those conditions are being stigmatized by others in their family and friends and associates that they come into contact with, they are being misunderstood. So this interrupts their ability to make decisions, to look for treatment that is going to be directed at their well-being. The flashbacks that occur after the encounters, whether the encounters are violent or whether the encounters are just ongoing as a result of microaggressions that have built up through the course of a person's life or through the time of a person's encounter in either household situations, school situations, neighborhood and community, and or employment situations. Those, excuse me, those things have to be viewed by these mental health caretakers so that they can get to the root causes, getting to the root causes so they can enable the individual to be able to adjust to those outside, to those external conditions, and then be able to proceed as normally as possible with their interest in being productive and enjoying the rewards of the livelihood and opportunities that are available to them. Now, psychologists have proposed a number of therapies that can be made available to those who feel that they have, believe that they have, or have been recommended for treatments in terms of some type of mental health imbalance. From the American Medical Association and the American Psychological Association, this is what they propose: behavior therapy, cognitive therapy, interpersonal therapy, psychoanalysis, psychodynamic psychotherapy, and supportive psychotherapy. This is the umbrella for many of the different types of therapies that come from the psychological point of view, that do not involve medications, that do not involve any type of prescriptive drugs or anything that would interfere with the healthy processing of an individual who does not have a pathological affliction that affects their ability to reason and to engage in a cognitive process. Now, the behavior therapy is one of the from the psychological point of view, in terms of looking at mental health imbalances, is one of those methods that is most widely pursued, because it treats behavior, the individual behavior, and to some extent, it looks at the outside affects which act on an individual and may be a contributor, and which is a contributor, or which are contributors to a person's mental well-being, and the behaviors that come out of their state of mental health. Now, behavior therapy is an umbrella term for types of therapy that treat mental health imbalances. Now, this form of therapy seeks to identify and help change potentially self-destructive and unhealthy behaviors. It functions on the idea that all behaviors are learned and that unhealthy behaviors can be changed. And the focus of this treatment is often on current problems and how to change them. That statement has two fallacies involved in it already. Current problems, as I said earlier, many of the problems in the African American community are not current. They are the result of generational imbalances in their households, in their community, and in the areas in which they happen to live and have to operate. So, without focusing and collaborating with the patient on the types of environments and the types of treat conditions that they have come from and come through, that that leaps over understanding the causes and nature of the problems of that particular individual. Also, that the mental health disorder itself is potentially self-destructive. That's a direct result of the outside conditions leading to the present state of that individual. The individual is not going to wake up in the morning, wake up going to bed at night neutral, and then wake up that next day as though the sky had fell on them. There has to be an accumulation of issues, either suddenly or over a period of time, which have accumulated, or over a short period of time, a person has reached their kindling point, where they are not able to balance out what is perceived as normal behavior with what they can only interpret as behavior that can be destructive to not only themselves but to others, or misinterpreted by others as self-destructive behavior. And when there is a misinterpretation of the conditions, the causes that affect an individual at the mental health level, again, we go back to the stigma. The stigma attached to that person outside of the medical arena, because those within the family, those who are familiar with the person, they are wondering what happened, what caused this, and it's more times than not, then it becomes an object of ridicule, an object that is condescending. It becomes a highlight that is condescending and derogatory in terms of why a person could not deal with those problems, deal with whatever issue that was at hand. And this comes again from those who have failed to look at the larger circumstances that have acted on an individual. And if we go back and look at many of the case studies and talk with some of the people who say they have a mental problem, or others who say this person has a mental problem, when we go into as much of the fuller understanding and investigation and analysis, we're going to find that it's not a personal issue. It is an issue that has been compounded by the effects and pressures and stresses of the larger society. And until the mental health professionals, therapists, until they start to look at the whole person in their whole environment through a continuum of their histories, Black people in particular are going to have such issues that are always highlighted, especially when there are acts of crime, when they are brought into the public in terms of criminal behavior, when they're brought into highlight in terms of not being able to hold a job, not being able to perform well at school, not being able to maintain personal relationships or family relationships without that whole understanding, then those types of attitudes, those types of perceptions are going to continue to proliferate and pass down not only within the families of the Black community, but to the in entire dominant society of this country. Now, one of the other models in terms of treatment of mental health imbalances is the recovery model, and that model is basically an holistic, person-centered approach to mental health care. And that model has quickly gained momentum over at least the past 10, 20 years. And it's becoming a standard model depending on the healthcare provider and who has access to those healthcare providers. Now, it is based on two simple premises. And one is that the first and most important is that in the absence of anything organic, anything that requires medical attention, that recovery is possible. That a person who believes that or believes and others have interpreted that person has stepped outside of the boundaries of the social codes, social behavior codes, and personal responsibility codes, that person can recover. And it's not so much of recovery, it's more a question and the ability of that individual, of those individuals being able to balance the impact of the outside circumstances on them and how they affect them in real ways. Again, in terms of education, housing, employment, medical care, personal relationships. If they are able to understand these are the reasons why you have not been able to reach common ground and break bread with this individual, with these individuals. If you have not been able to be stable in the work environment, if you have not been able to maintain some type of continuity in the classroom situation, then that's not recovery. Is that person being able to understand and take hold of their relationship to others and others' perception of them. Now, as the model replies, the recovery model implies, its hallmark principle is the belief that people can recover from mental illness to lead full, satisfying lives. Now, we all understand that there's always a balance and imbalance in everybody's life. And the things that act to create imbalances in life are not normally created by the individual. They are created by those circumstances outside of the individual. Now, until the mid-70s, many practitioners believed that patients with mental health conditions were doomed to live with their illness forever and would not be able to continue in society. Again, the fallacy in that has to go with the fact that there is nothing, no empirical evidence to indicate that an individual, except in the case of something that interferes with their ability to process and interpret information and to make rational decisions, nothing in that body of evidence indicates that anyone who's going through these imbalances, who's experienced these imbalances at the for acutely or over long periods of time, that they are not able to recover, regroup, understand their individual value and worth, and to gainfully participate in those things which are rewarding to them. Now, this belief in terms of the model recovery, it is it particularly affects those with schizophrenia disorders, bipolar disorders, those who have those types of neurotic conditions, anxieties, and depressions based on, again, the outside pressures or the perception of outside pressures. And they are not able to manage their skills, their drives, their motivations to match the expectations of others. This has been one of the many causes of many disorders generationally and in current times. And as the individual and as groups of people, communities recognize that unless there is that balance that provides for the well-being, the healthy state of mind of the individual, then these conditions are going to continue to develop. They're going to continue to grow, especially as the economic conditions and the mental conditions which affect those who are touched by economic disaster and subsequent personal disasters, as long as they continue to be able to seep into the Black and poor communities and affect the individual, we are going to have these negative types of behavior, these negative types of actions exhibited among our people. But until, again, those who are entrusted with that medical care, with that health care, until they realize that they have to stand above the old type, tunnel vision type of treatment, that it is always the individual at blame, and then that society itself has the larger impact and the greater impact on the individual. Until those type of treatments are understood and approached, we are going to continue down the same path where we find those who are looked at, viewed at, and actually exist outside of the mainstream perimeters of society. They're always going to be viewed from a condescending and derogatory point of view, because society as a whole has come to understand, this society, the American society, has come to understand that those who do not act as we expect them to act have issues, and that they need to be isolated, and then given whatever treatment can be given them. In a well-ordered society, when there are imbalances, when there are mental health imbalances, it is believed that those who have the ability to investigate and to analyze those types of conditions at the individual levels will look into the many conditions and causes that create those imbalances, to bring them into accord with not only the general social minds, thinking, but to at the same time serve notice to the greater society that there are those of us who cannot withstand all the pressures the same way that that the next person can withstand those pressures. And that is one of the things also that contribute to the stigma of mental health, and it contributes to the ignorance about mental health conditions, that those believe that because they do not have to go through, they haven't fallen in their lives, they haven't had those moments and those periods of life where they've experienced those downfalls, while others have experienced and have not been able to rise from those downfalls. There are too many members of this society, of the American society, who have that mindset, is that why did they fall? Why can't they get up? Without looking at the overriding and general conditions which led those people to fall from a point where they thought they could succeed and be successful further down the road. The solution lies into a whole society understanding of individuals who are not able to cope with the madness, the social rat race that exists around them, at the economic levels in particular, and at the personal levels as they flow from the economic pressures that and the entrapment that people subsequently find themselves in. This has become a situation where people are caught in that push ahead and succeed type of mindset. And that type of mindset always finds people in, especially as is perceived and looked upon in this society as if you're not moving forward, if you aren't making a contribution, then everything else you do is not in the best interest of yourself or society as a whole. Without also understanding that everyone cannot keep pace with the next person. And if they fall behind or fall down, they have to take time, and others have to take time to look at what are the conditions which affect them and how they can be reached in terms of bringing them into into realizing that they are still contributors, individual contributors, and can have that individual ability, that power to determine their own destinies, their own well-being, without having to rely solely on the expectation of a larger society and the advertised dreams that each of us cannot always maintain or reach on that daily and continued basis. So the mental health condition is going to revolve around that until the whole society situation is investigated, is analyzed, and brought to bear on the individual so that they can see themselves as an individual with respect, with dignity, and able to accomplish, to able to move, to able to raise and move themselves forward, however, at whatever pace they can. Until each individual is able to do that, then the mental health crisis is going to be a persistent albatross around the neck of the medical therapy and the condition that people find themselves in when they view themselves outside of the standard, and society views those people as anomalies within the accepted and expected norms of American society. So with that, I just want to close on the point that those who have experienced periods of frustration, anxiety, depression, those who have had some feelings, have had those neurotic episodes. Those are not anomalies. Those are not abnormalities in terms of the spectrum of human behavior. And when they are overlooked, that is the area where we get into trouble. And when the broader society or those within our own network do not understand that because of the outside pressures and expectations, everyone cannot keep pace and cannot recognize the same things from person to person. Until we each are able to do that, we are going to find ourselves with those who are affected by these diagnosed conditions that are recognized as mental illness. But with the mental health condition and those who recognize it and do seek treatment, one thing that has become prevalent upon, in terms of recovery model is that it is okay not to be okay. Let's get it done.
Man, that's powerful stuff, man. I'm glad you talked about it. You know, my biggest thing here with this mental health thing is not only the stigma, but how do we get the services to our community? Because it's a struggle, and we don't have enough providers, and we don't have enough culturally appropriate providers. But again, we can't just continue to talk about the mental health crisis and not be willing to take things. So the model you guys have is pretty cool, and hopefully we could get some people to follow us and follow that lead, because it's a big deal, and you see it all the way around. But one of the things that you said, Professor Steve, that really caught my attention when you talked about when crimes and things happen. They don't really talk about mental health when it comes to black folks that's doing crimes. Usually, they put the mental health label when there's a mass shooting or somebody uh, some white kid do a massacre or something, they'll say, "Oh, he was troubled by mental health," but you never hear him say it when it's a crime happening from black people. So that's just one thing I picked up on. I noticed it. It seems to be that's the way to get out when there's a mental health issue or a massacre or a big shooting. Even with this one that just happened in Atlanta, it was mental health. He was disturbed. But never do we hear that in the black community. And I think the rarity that Dr. Saturo talked about is an anomaly to me as well. When things affect black folks as a whole, it's always something rare or special. But how do we get those things, implemented and get out there so that we can start dealing with them one at a time?
Okay. Thank you, John. And again, just because we know what a thing is, it's one thing. Moving towards that goal, being able to solve the problem is more important. Just because we have the knowledge and the understanding and have that sitting on the bookshelf, that is not going to solve the problem. Even though we understand the nature, the generational conditions, generational and current conditions that lead to these recognition of mental health, unless they are acted upon, unless the community has access, has those facilities, because the hospitals facilities do not have access for mental health treatment for African American people. They do not care. The hospitals, the major hospitals do not care. We have to have those type of concerned healthcare givers who are going to look in terms of our particular needs and how to address our environments, because we cannot speak to the mental health conditions of someone on Wall Street who's only worrying about working more hours and earning a fatter paycheck and putting more money into his investment folio. We are talking about those individuals, those mothers and fathers. We're talking about those men and women who are in prison and worrying about getting out of prison and getting back into the mainstream of society. We're talking about those men and women who are having nervous breakdowns because they can't pay the rent. We're talking about those men and women who can't teach their children at home and can't help their children with their homework. We're talking about those men and women who have to work 2 and 3 jobs just to keep a roof over their head, just to keep clothes on their back, just to have enough food to make it from week to week. Those type of conditions, those type of situations, those all contribute to the deterioration of any individual. And that is part of the identification of mental health imbalances that is often glossed over because they do not become classified as major issues. They poor, they got problems. That's all they are identified as. They're low income. They got problems. They need to pay their tax, pay their bills. But they do not, those policymakers, those who address the conditions in the neighborhoods, do not address those external, those factors which also impact the individual and their families and those that they are involved with. Without that type of recognition, all we are doing is going around and round in circles, tilting windmills all over again.
Wow, wow, that's very, very powerful. I see Sister Catherine trying to get back in. Maybe a CBO can reach out to her. Just tell her re-click on the link that we invited her with, and I should get her back on because I think she has a very important part of this. I think her talking about nutrition, the food. We don't talk about this in the Black community, but the food from our grocery stores, the processed food, is so bad. And I think this also plays into a lot of the mental health issues that our young people face. This poor food that we're eating. But I think the other thing that you talked about that I think that's really powerful is, see, this circumstantial mental health is what you're talking about when people are faced with, loss of job, loss of resources. Sometimes those are a lot of our mental health issues. And what happens is these people get diagnosed and they get medicated. And maybe that's the problem, because I hear a lot of people, they going through these issues. It's like this mental health issue is really not something that we need to medicate this person, put them on prescription pills. We need some resources for the community to help them, and that'll help the mental health. So, I mean, because, I just think my perspective is, in America, we've pushed drugs more than anything. We don't do any natural healing. Everything is prescription based. And I think the social economical impact is causing a lot of this mental health, right? I mean, you look at what's
John, John, if I don't have a job, can't pay the rent, and I'm depressed, I don't need an antidepressant. I need a job and some money so I can keep that roof over my head. I don't need an antidepressant. I don't need a bottle of drugs. I need that money to pay the rent. That is my antidepressant.
No, that's it, man, and that's just some of it. And I think it's a lot of it, the traumas that we definitely have to deal with. But I want to go back to Saturo too, because I want to talk about this environmental thing. And I talked about my buddy who passed away this Friday, high blood pressure, heart condition, had a heart attack. And this is a big problem in the Black community. High blood pressure and cholesterol and diabetes is so big, right? And my thing is, how much is it food? Is the food that we eat? Because I know they always try to say, well, we eat bad. And I get it. The soul food could be not the healthiest food. But again, how much of it is just the environment that we've been put in? Like you talked about, Saturo, in Oakland and Hunters Point and San Francisco. This waste, this environmental waste, when it comes to nuclear waste, when it comes to all of these different hazardous materials that we use, asbestos and lead and different things. How much is it? Because when I hear generational, or I hear DNA is it's in your genes, is it really in the genes, or is it just the environments that we live in?
You know what? Bringing all both those concepts together, what Professor Steve was talking about, the mental aspect as well as the environment and the food, has all rolled into one. First of all, like he said, so my environment dictates the fact that I'm already exposed to chemicals and things that are ready to deteriorate my health. My mental state of mind also contributes to the deterioration of how I feel about life. So the environmental, then the aspect of the food that is not available, of growing up on 3 McDonald's meals a day, as you well know, and also having not the ability to bring it to the table in terms of going to the doctor. So with the environment, I feel sick because of the lead I'm eating, or my children aren't learning, or the asbestos that they never took out of the roof, which is common in our community, right? So I'm breathing this and all these health issues. I only go for the period of time to get checked out of what is happening to me right then and there. Meanwhile, as Steve says, when I go there, instead of really looking at it, they want to fill me up with pills. And I'm talking about, I don't need an antidepressant. I'm trying to explain to you the conditions I live in are bad. All the chemicals and things and the air quality and the housing and all the chemicals that are in there. And then even with the food aspect, everything we get, look at the labels. I was told by my doctor not to buy anything. I got a good doctor. Me and him talk. You know, I had to set him straight at first, but it's good now. But nothing under 5 milligrams of salt. Every time we buy something, look at salt that's in it and sugar. But in particular, the salt dries it up. So by the time you eat a meal, even when you go to the store, using the seasonings and everything, you may have what, Professor Steve, 2,000 or 3,000 milligrams of salt. Couple that with the food you're eating, couple that with the environment you're in, and like he said, the mental state, of course, is going to lead to your total demise and everything. And getting back to what Professor Steve says, one accountability right now. What about all these networks of Black mental professionals and Black doctors and nurses? We should be holding them accountable and say, you need to come together and join us and make this a national forum for our people. As I know of at this point in time, that's not being done.
Wow, that's a big problem, and we got to do it. And that's what we like to do here is hold people accountable, and we talk about this unity thing. And we got to get, like you said, these professionals to come together and really hold some forums and really educate our people. And I think the real thing is this eating thing. And again, we got to fight and push the FDA to make sure that these labels make sense to us. And how do we get the right people to come together to say how much is a livable, tolerable amount of everything that's in these ingredients, right? Because because if we don't get that, then the food industry is the real poverty pimps that are causing the genocide in health, right? Because that's the problem. Right. If they can say warning labels for cigarettes and everything else, the Surgeon General has these labels, we have to say in our food, you only could put X, Y, and Z because we know anything above this is going to cause a critical care or a critical medical condition for some people. And I think that's the real fight, having that real conversation and holding them accountable because they know the research is there. If you indulge this much sugar, this much salt, this much whatever other process is going to affect you. So I think that's the conversation that we really need to have.
You know what? And another aspect, as you well know, the work that we are all doing with the Alumni Network, myself, Pastor Steve, Sister Catherine, and CBO, we are breaking into the schools and working with our students. And there's so many educational aspects, not just knowing the history. One thing I used to do with my own kids, and I took a group of kids and did is we went on to what we call to the supermarket. And we had already talked about what is not good for you. So they were going to the store looking at the labels, right? And the first rule that we taught them was, if you can't read it, it's not good for your body. Monosodium gluconide. And they be asking, so that kind of thing is an educational tool by taking our children on what we call, Professor Steve, an informative trip to where they start doing, and those kids, once they learn it, they will adhere to it. Mama, don't buy that. Look, it's got too much sodium salt and make your blood pressure go up. It identifies them with what we call issues with the whole family. And that is starting with them at this point in time. I also want to mention, I don't know if you guys knew about the whole medicine of psychology, psychiatric aspects of behavior and practice in America started right after World War II, Operation Paperclip, when they had the Nuremberg trials or the horrendous treatment and experiments that these Nazi doctors Many of them, 1,500, were brought. They called them the modern purveyors of modern American psychology and psychiatric studies. They came and brought them from Nazi Germany. So basically, their whole process was centered around three topics, which they continue today: survival of military personnel, testing of drugs and treatments, what is happening in America now, and the advancement of Nazi racial and ideological goals, the whole concept of eugenics. So they actually brought these people here, besides those scientists and the doctors, and they actually put them into, what do you think shock treatment came from? These were experiments they were using in Nazi prison camps, and that is the basis of mental health as well as physical health in America.
Danielle, did you want to ask anything, Danielle?
No, I did want to put in. So I talked to a nutritionist yesterday. I personally am going to try to get a nutritionist. And so I talked to one yesterday, and he said that only 2 teaspoons of sugar is the amount of sugar that we're supposed to have in a whole day, and that our food pyramid is off. And so when we grew up in school, we were told to follow the food pyramid, and that's way off. You know, and if you look at these labels, like you're looking at how much sodium is in these foods, check out the amount of sugar. Sugar is almost in everything. And there's certain stuff that shouldn't even have sugar in it. It's like, why is sugar in this? You know, so it's throwing us off, it's increasing the diabetes, and it's just really throwing our bodies off whack. And so that's the reason why I'm thinking that we have, you know, an increase in especially in diabetes and other healthcare problems. I know you mentioned sarcoidosis too as a healthcare issue. My father had it. All those diseases that you said we're prone to, I can think about just about everybody in my family that has had that and has passed away from that. So it's definitely even putting me at a much higher risk. And I already started yesterday. I decided to just get up on it. So, but yeah, it's a huge issue, and we do need to hold some of these people accountable that are pushing these laws, and you know, CDC, everybody, they're in on it. They know what's up. They know it's causing issues, but it's tied to money and politics, and it's a tough battle to fight.
What those pyramids worked it good back in school, because we only seen them one time. I remember I seen them like in 3rd or 4th grade, the milk, the cheese, the vegetables. Yeah. I ain't seen nothing else. I don't remember. I can't even think in high school. I don't even remember any nutritional talks, you know. And most times we don't get it till we go to college. I remember at City College we talked about that, but we got to do better. And it is the education thing, but we also got to get, you know, those things worked when we were exercising. See, if you had a little bit more and you're active, it always balanced out. But we in times now where the active part of our life are not there, and that's a challenge as well. So I got to shout out U3 Fit. This is a sister in San Francisco. She's doing personal training, nutrition, helping her out. Man, I got to support the sister because, you know, she's on a mission to make sure people are living right, eating right. And it takes that exercise part as well. And I think that's what we're losing, especially during this pandemic, sitting in the house on Zoom, not able to be mobile like we used to, is definitely impacting the community. So that's a good thing that you said.
Well, you know, I was going to quickly mention the fact that when we grew up, I know Steve was an athlete in martial arts. I was track and field and other, and the schools, they recruited you. You could have 2 or 3 brothers, and all of you would be playing football, basketball, what have you, which also taught you skills and discipline, team togetherness, working together, all these wonderful things. They took that away. They knew when they took away gym and physical activities, what they were doing. That's another layer of demise, and they start with our children. Our communities used to be very active. When I grew up, they had a national, when President Johnson was president, they had a national physical fitness program where if you was good enough, you would get the gold shorts, and then there'll be red and then green, like karate belt in martial arts. And if you weren't just a nerd, you get the white shorts, right? But everybody excelled. You had certain activities that the men and young brothers and sisters participated in, and you took pride. And it led you on to having what we call great physical health, which automatically, when you're in athletes, you get regular physical checkups. And, you know, why did the guy drop on the court? Had a heart problem. And it's the kind of care that you get is not even thorough when you have athletes in college and in professionals still dropping on the floor with problems. But we at least got that much, in terms of that. So physical activity among our young people is so important, and it's been taken away.
Man, that's definitely powerful. I'm glad you said that. This Friday night, we just had a high school kid. I just posted that news story that passed away on
Yeah.
the football field. So it's definitely real. But I know we're getting close here to ending. It's 4 o'clock. I was trying to give Panther Queen and Kathleen the time to come back in. I guess they can't get in. So I don't know what's going on, but
Yeah.
I really wanted them, but I'm gonna have to get them back on to do this nutrition thing. So I think that's very important. But to you and Steve, last time we talked about it, especially the black male health, black women health. What information, that checklist that we talked about, that we want to make sure that our people are, when they going to get their physical checkups, that they're getting those above the normal checks, because we know sometimes our hospitals only do certain checks. But talking about the sickle cell, talking about mental health, talking about some of the other issues, what checks should our males be going out there to actually have their doctors check so that they know? Because we know that they don't check everything, but the most important thing that you guys see from a healthcare standpoint that's impacting us, what does that checklist look like, and what do people need to be getting checked off their list?
Okay. Well, one of the things that they need to in their family, of course, one of the things, of course, we start off with diabetes, right? Number two, asthma. Number three, sarcoidosis, lung cancer, strokes, high blood pressure, cancer, which for most males, as we well know, prostate as well as colon cancer. And they have regular tests that people can take where you don't have to do the colonoscopy now. One of the best is Cologuard, which is 97% accurate on every level, which will detect. So there are ways for them to prevent that. And also sickle cell, and of course, the mental aspect. So those, as far as physical aspect, those are the 8 categories that we should. I'll quickly read them again: diabetes, asthma, sarcoidosis, lung cancer, strokes, high blood pressure, cancer, and sickle cell anemia. Those are the categories. And again, I'm going to say this: if we contact, and this is something we could do, the Association of Black Nurses and Black Doctors, that's where we begin on that professional level to get them to join us in putting this information out. They should be the ones to help mandate this with the National Health Agency as well as the mental health issue. But we never know what results, and this is part of putting the idea into practice by getting them involved also as an organization.
There you have it. For all of the black doctors and nurses out there, listen, we have now put out the call to action. We have a health crisis in America.
Right.
We need you guys' support to get this movement going. We got to have these same movements happening all across the board. We all can't just show up for Black Lives Matters.
That's right.
We got a health crisis in America. We have a mental health crisis in America that is just as bad as this pandemic. So we have to really focus in on it, and we have to take it serious. So all of our Black professional doctors and nurses, reach out to us. We can put this conversation together. We could be the change and take the lead to impact this country. And it just takes a couple phone calls and a little bit of networking. We got some phenomenal people here, the Legacy Keepers. We got some other community people. We can work with our institutions and get this change to make it really happen. So I think that's a powerful drive that we should be pushing.
That's right. The ball's in your court, folks. The ball's in their court right now. Get
health
back to
it. Health is wealth.
That's right. Thank you. I like that.
So I guess they're not going to be able to get back in. So we're going to work on closing this thing out today, because she said she'll just do a nutrition presentation. So I guess she'll sign up for one of our educational Thursdays and do it. I think that'll be powerful as well. But I think you guys hit on it. Steve, I just want to let you know, I want to invite you. We got a couple more conversations coming up with some mental health people on May 2nd, another Sunday conversation. It's going to be a number of mental health professionals from backgrounds. I'm reaching out to some other people in the community because there's a lot of inequities in this mental health There's a lot more resources needed. I'm hearing from some of the people that's in school talking about the challenges of getting the hours and all of that. And the reason why I made that statement that mental health and this health crisis is just as bad as the pandemic, because when this pandemic happened, there was a lot of elected officials who made compromise, emergency orders to change some of the schooling decisions on how to people that don't have all of the qualification or lower the standards for people to get into school or get out, so that because they needed more nurses and doctors on the field. And I think it's time that we look at it on a mental health. It's time to maybe reduce the hours because we need people that's culturally appropriated. And we know how to deal with our people, so maybe we need to cut down the amount of hours and the standards to get into these programs, and definitely on all areas from our teachers to our mental health. There's a wage gap that's happening that we also have to address. And we got to look at how do we reinvest this money, because it seems like there's a lot of money. There's never enough money, but there's a lot of money going into mental health, but there's still a lack or a shortage of mental health service providers actually going into the areas that need the work. And we have to figure out this model. If we're going to make mental health cool, if we're going to make it something that we're going to take the stigma off, we have to make it to where it's affordable with these nonprofits and these different sectors of work that's happening. We have to make it where we can give it to our kids in the schools, in the homes, and make it accessible and make it cool. We need more people to speak up and promote this mental health thing so that we can remove this stigma. And some of it is in legislative too. We got to change some of the negative legislation as well that impacts mental health. But again, it's a lot of work, a lot of things that need to happen, and just looking to work with you guys and trying to make this awareness real and get the right processes that we need to really make the change. Because I'm tired of hearing about mental health, but when you look around the community, the services are not there. So that's my end on that. Go ahead, Nero.
I was just going to mention you're absolutely right, and that is so crucial. And they're already talking about. I don't know how they plan on doing this. This is one of the things that roll across their lips as they make these what we call unkept promises. Or we're going to also start bringing in mental health people, where as opposed to calling police officers. You call a police officer, might as well go ahead and call the funeral home because you know they're going to kill them, and that's what they do. Instead of are you in the process of educating? There should be whole schools of training that to go into our community. You should be able to employ people to be there, to talk a brother or sister down, because only we have that method once we learn the application to do so. So that is another question, because they're talking about doing it, or are you training or hiring? So yes, I think that is one of the most important aspects that Professor Steve brought forward. It ties in everything from the mental to the physical and everything in between.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. I'm a big advocate of making mental health part of our 8-hour workday. I think every company should give 1 hour of mental health therapy for all their employees. And I think that's the way we can also get it, because I think if people are tired of work, you give them an hour to go talk to some mental health. We have to be intentional with getting these services, information, this coping to the community. And I think the employers have a responsibility as well in it. And I think we talk about safety meetings and everything else. And I think mental health is one of the components that need to be added into our quarterly or some kind of training portfolio for employees as well. Because again, everybody's dealing with something, and you see the workplace violence and the things that's happening in the workplace, and that's mental health too. So we gotta put this thing all around and incorporate it the best way we can. I think that's gonna be the way it's gonna work for everybody.
Okay. Yeah, I
Well
just
said.
want to throw in one thing. In terms of that condition, the mental state of mind, if a person feels good about themselves and their environment, that's going to enable them, empower them. It's going to put pep in their step. It's going to have them enabled to look forward to not only doing things for themselves, but then it gives them enough energy, enough motivation and incentive so that they can do other things also. But when the people feel that they have that albatross around their neck, when they feel that they're being dragged down and weighted down, then there's and people lose that sense of connection with themselves and with others around them, then this is what people begin to withdraw. They will begin to see themselves in a situation where they are not able to realize what they want to be. They're not able to actualize what they want to be. And so as people meet those different hurdles that come down the road, that's going to enhance how they feel, not only about themselves, but in terms of how they view each other. But this concept has to grow from the classroom, has to grow to a societal level, so that people in other communities also embrace the idea, and they can share it with others and not just try to sit on it because it's something passed in the classroom or something passed back and forth between the medical professions. So we want to feel good. We want our people to feel good. If they feel good about themselves, they're going to feel good physically. They're going to do things that are going to protect them physically, and as we do that, the community is going to be safe, secure. They're going to find ways to further develop that empowerment, to help them to determine the destiny of their communities and help to improve the quality of their lives and the quality of the state of this society.
Wow, powerful. Danielle, did you want to say anything before we close out? Any last words?
Just once again, your health is your wealth. And, we are responsible for what we know. Okay. We're not responsible for what we don't know in our ignorance. But if you know what to do to change yourself and your environment, do it. There are some people that are in some toxic situations around toxic people and will just not leave. And that is adding to our stress, and that's taking a toll on our body. And so we need to be, take hold of that. If it's our job, we need to be looking for another one. If it's causing us to be sick and stressful, we need to be in the process of looking for one, another one. If it's the people we are around, we need to change that. And if you are a parent, you really need to be careful, because you have children that you are exposing to that toxic environment. And they have to go and take on that too. And again, once again, our health. I know we can go out now, y'all. We can go out. We don't have to be in the house all day. Run, jog. That not only is that good for your body, but that's releasing stress. So we need to exercise more. We need to change our diet, throw away that Kool-Aid, throw away them top ramen noodles because it has too much sodium. You know what I'm saying? There are certain things we can do that we can change right now. So we got to start there first. So that's all I had to say.
Even if you just dance around, right, John, Danielle, turn on your music and just get down, and that release. I tell it to people all the time. You don't want to run, get out there and dance around for a couple of hours. You'll get your exercise in, and then you feel great also. Absolutely. Music of your choice. It works.
Well, we're going to go ahead and start closing this segment out. We want to thank the Black Panther Legacy Keepers, Dr. Steve McCutcheon, Satoru, Kathleen. I know she wasn't able to get back in. And CBO, just want to thank you guys again for just always coming back, educating our community, giving them the information and tools that's needed, because it's coping. We just have to cope in these times. But we are resilient people. We're getting through this pandemic, but we know people are on the breaking edge. So just great to hear from you guys. And hopefully some of the service providers and some of the people who are watching, looking at you guys' models, take this information and really consider about taking the first step to better facilitate and learn how to handle the medical needs of the people of our community. So that's just a blessing. Just want to say thank you guys again. And this Tuesday, we're going to have another segment of our Hidden Gems. We're going to have a phenomenal guest coming on. We're going to highlight some more Black leaders of the community, some more Black and brown businesses. So looking forward to that segment this Tuesday at 7 p.m. And then this Thursday, we'll have another Educational Thursday where we have another educational presentation to help give the community the sauce, the information that's needed. It's all information to close this gap. And we're just going to be thankful to have another one of those. And then the following Sunday, we're going to have our 100% college prep students come on here, and they're going to be doing some phenomenal stuff next Sunday. So looking forward to that. That should be a phenomenal show. We have some programming things that's going to be coming up here, both sides of the conversation. Danielle's back now from vacation. We'll be talking about the speed dating. We got our arts thing coming up. We're going to have some talent show things coming up for our young people and for community. So be looking out for it. It's coming down the pipeline as we move and we start getting our getting our team back from vacation. They all out, and just want to say thank you to all of our team for all the hard work, dedication. A lot of them are on vacation, and they still tapping in, doing the little things behind the scenes that need to be done. We appreciate you guys. Wait to see everybody back so we can start pushing this thing forward and really start furthering impacting our community, because we know there's resources coming, but there's programming and impact that needs to happen as well. And it starts with us doing the work. So happy to be having that information, and just looking forward to continue to do things. We are looking for people for ideals. Any information, please send it to both sides of the conversation at Gmail, and we will reach back out to you because we're moving forward, and we need this information. Any topics that you guys feel that we need to talk about? We have some powerful topics coming up. It's going to be some powerful stuff coming, but please reach out to us on our website if you have any of those recommendations, so we can get those topics and conversations on the list, so we can start reaching out to people and making sure that we have the right people who have the experience and the knowledge of that work or that topic, so that we can make sure that it impacts the community in the way that it needs. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and end today's segment. Thanks for tuning in to Both Sides of the Conversation for our Sunday conversation. As you guys know, every week we will have these. We'll be here. If you want to be a part of one of these conversations, please go to our website, look up our topics. One of these topics might fit your professional background or just some things that you've been dealing with, and you could be a part of that conversation. So with that being said, thank you. See you guys on Tuesday.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.